Welcome to Creating Better Products, where we explore the real world stories from product leaders. Not just their successes, but also their failures and their lessons learned. You will get practical tips that you can apply tomorrow. I'm your host, Sabrina Mach. I have almost 2 decades of experience and I love learning from others. This is why my mission is to share the stories of amazing products and design professionals with you and the world. And today we will talk about a question that's often on many people's minds, which is how can we get faster? In the name of efficiency, that is the question on everyone's mind. How do we increase delivery speed, speed to value? How can we get our product teams to deliver value faster to customers? And I have a guest today who will share how a changed way of working enabled the team to go from spending 3 months to build something no one really wants to spending 3 weeks that was perceived as valuable and that caused users to demand it and queue up for it. We will hear an example of how to do it wrong and how to do it right. And what are the different approaches and methods that we can use to do that? And today, my guest is Johanna Vollrath. Johanna, you are a service designer who uses their design skills to transform product teams into high-performing product teams. And that is how you're able to make improvements, like we heard in the introduction, increasing delivery speed and speed to value of teams significantly. Johanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sabrina.
I can't wait to hear how you're using your design skills to help transform teams. When we hear about service design and user experience design, we often think about creating products and services that people love. And that is part of your role, but you've kind of expanded that to say, hey, actually, we can design our team to make that better. So how did you get into that? What was your journey into this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, thanks so much for having me and also nudging me on that topic. I think it's one that is very relevant these days, especially for anyone, let it be product teams or service teams or even internal teams that struggle to make things happen. And management really knocking on the door saying, hey, we have a financial decision to make, but I don't see progress happening. How can we change this? Financial and economical struggles really nudging on our door saying, hey, we need to change something, but what and how? And how the heck are we going to do this? Because it feels like a mountain of work. And I thought this might be a really interesting reflection on how we might get out of this, or through which approaches we can maybe do that, and potentially through the support of designer skills. Not necessarily designers, but the skills that we bring to the table, what they kind of mean. We want to come in as either designers or people with design skills, and how we might approach this situation of the economic pressure.
Yes, and it is the economic pressure, but also another aspect that organizations are feeling is speed of change seems to be
Yes.
ever increasing, as well as uncertainty. And with that, we need that ability to pivot and react and adapt to those changes quickly. So finding ways to be faster is top of mind for many organizations and leaders within that. So Johanna, please tell me your secret. How can we do it?
Yes, absolutely. I do want to give a couple of contextual nudges before I kind of tell the story, because of course, I'm bringing in my experience of 10 years and numerous projects and team setups, but I do wanted to focus on one project in specific, so I can give you some more tangible examples around that as well. So in this case, we were in a very large program with 6 teams and multiple projects attached to it, with 70 plus people in the small circle. And also we were working on a very grand scale solution for a very complex tool replacing an internal monolith. So it had really, for me specifically, very fascinating complexity in not only the topic itself, the technology itself, but also on a stakeholder management aspect. And I think it really resonate with many people. Hey, we do have a challenge. We have too many people, too many voices, too many opinions. How the hell do we move faster? And most of these contextual stories also are around the circle where the program with multiple projects was already running for 2+ years. And this is kind of where we jump in.
So you kind of jumped into a driving car. Can one say that? Like you like ripping the door
in a
open and like
way, yes,
jumping in
yeah.
as it's moving.
Absolutely. So we had, we had foundation, we had tested something, things had happened already. People, very clever people, have started, engaged, and driven this thing forward, and with a lot of speed already. However, we landed at the situation where a lot of frustrations came in. So this was also starting post-COVID. So there were already a couple of cuts and a lot of financial challenges coming in, saying, which projects are we going to still continue? There's the management, clients all being stressing, oh, we need to prove that we're still very valuable to those with the money decisions. We had a lot of delivery pressure of showing something, teams being very demotivated because even though they've done great work, people didn't understand how great it was because it wasn't visually showing progress. Mm-hmm. And very deflated designers that were just pushed to create something visually, but there was not much meat to it. And a very unsatisfied user saying, oh, but what you've done is not working yet. And you promised me something that you haven't delivered yet. And in this muddle, we really had the situation like, we need to change something, but what do we change? And everyone pushing into this, but we just need to be faster. And this is, I think, exactly that wonderful melting pot of situations where what I want to talk about might really work and really worked for this team. So little, giveaway here. What we achieved to change was that we really secured continuous financial support. We were able to deliver super fast in this example of, going from 3 months for one piece of work into 3 weeks to a very comparable piece of work. Motivated and acknowledged teams that were, driving things forward, a healthy workload for people across the board and also designers, and users across the globe actually asking and requesting to be part of the solution because it worked so well for them. And yes, let's talk about the how.
We have the painful current state.
Yes.
The driving car that you're jumping in, and then you find people are stressed. The project, the engagement, the product is being questioned as well as others. Is it creating value? People are feeling demotivated on the technology side because they don't understand the value they're creating. Designers are being deflated because design is just understood in terms of like, make us a few screens, to then making that great shift around increasing speed and creating a team that's highly engaged in the work that they're doing.
Exactly.
So how did you do that?
Yes, how the heck did I and the team that I work with do this? So as a designer, I heard all those great talks about when you pick up people and help them understand the user perspective, that they're much more enabled and strong in their part of their work as well, and increases that team. And I tried to live that, throughout my career, but here it really manifested itself that I understood that people didn't quite understand why they're working on something, whom they're working for, in the sense of, beyond their management, and why a piece of work would be important or in which way it would be important.
I'm really curious. So you
Yes.
came into this team, and I guess in the first moment, your expected focus as a designer isn't on the team. Why did that become so important for you? I mean,
Mm,
of course, apart from caring for our colleagues and trying to, be a good team
yes,
together, how and why was that such a pressing issue for you to solve?
absolutely. Um, for me, the main part was I came in and I said, I might have a solution and I might have an idea on how to help the team be successful. And actually, you know, at least reduce the challenges that they were dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And I was coming in talking to people on any level, about my ideas, about the thing that I, mentioned. I have an idea, I might be able to solve this. And I noticed that the key element throughout the whole program was that I didn't quite understand what I meant, and what it would mean for me to actually execute that part of the work. So what I thought was, okay, there's no better way of knowing what I mean by actually experiencing it. And that was kind of my go-to and say, okay, let's try out something. Let's go in and help people understand what I mean. If they think this is still not working, still not helping, I can pivot and I can change direction and I can support in a different way.
And what did that look like? What was that journey?
Yes. So one key element was that I came in and I used the service blueprinting method, where I was able to map out all the journeys of a user, what they might do, what they need, which systems they would use, what is the background and the technology aspect that would support those systems, and highlight the overall, why do they even need that step? What are they trying to actually get to? And I would not only make that visible, but I would catch up all those great minds on the team and their knowledge part to highlight which wonderful understanding we already had, and added a layer of what do we not understand, but we need to understand it in order to make great product decisions. So by really going in and asking, um, what is our answer here, and highlighting that the difference in answer might need a completely different approach to our product. It highlighted the importance that we actually talk to users, talk to people who really know that answer, help us understand it in a very short and easy way. So we don't build something wrong or go into that difficult space of spending time on something that we're not sure of. So it added that layer of, oh, we might be able to do something much quicker by not doing something wrong.
Hmm.
And that really resonated with our technology experts, with our architects, with our product managers, but also those who stood in representing the user perspective. And they all came together and said, oh, okay, yeah, we need to really find out this. And here we have someone who can help us find that out quickly. So by being together in that, just really quickly flashing it out, making it visible to the team, we were able to say, oh, okay, this is important to us now. And we can avoid so much by just going through this type of process.
It brings a question to mind. You mentioned that this process helps you not do something wrong.
Mm.
Now, we or many of us live in this fail fast experiment, and failure is about learning and fixing forward.
Yes.
How does that go together with let's not do something wrong
Mm.
and failing fast? It
Yeah.
could be seen as something that doesn't work together, but I have a feeling that
Yes.
that's not what you have in mind.
Oh, absolutely. I love that you're bringing this up. The let's fail fast mentality, or let's say way of working, means something so different in different heads, in different companies, in different cultures. And um, especially within that pressure environment of, oh, now we really need to check which projects are we going to continue, and are we still going to get you some financial boosters. um, People, we noticed throughout, the consultancy that I work with, um, we noticed that people were always pivoting back and saying that, oh, but we always done it this way, so let's just be safe. Let's just do it the
Hmm.
way that we've done before. Let's go the way that we know or believe it's true. However, the effect that it had was that many teams and many decisions were based on the assumption of something being right or working in a certain way and being perceived as something good by someone else that we didn't know of. So we didn't ask the user, we didn't have validation, we didn't have the actual true reflection of someone saying, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. And that can be right, no doubt about it. And you can have wonderful minds in your team representing that perspective in a correct way. But what we've learned, not only through my project, not only through the project across company, not only through the historical products of the client's company that we worked with, but throughout the design community and product communities, is that it can be so wrong, and it can be so costly and lengthy. So, how better to increase speed by spending the correct um, notion or the correct interest at the correct time, quickly, cheaply, in order for you to know which direction you're going into and if that is a right and pursuable correction to go to.
And what is that correct approach that helps you to do that?
Early validation, quick validation with the correct uh, representative that can give you that validation. And I can be, super cheap, super fast. But if you don't do that and don't invest that time early, that is what mostly leads to those challenges. And this project, again, showed it so vividly and in such a nice comparison that, for example, we had one team which was working with one user and asked that one user, hey, what do you think about this? This is how far we got. Do you like this, how it looks? And then the user said, yes, yes. And the user also said, I want this to be moved. And then the team came back and moved exactly that thing without
Mhm.
understanding why do they need to have it moved. Does it work with the projects that were connected to the solution? Would it work for a system that was attached to multiple projects and multiple teams across the board? Would it make sense from a architectural sense? Would it make sense from a data system, etc.? And that just created a spiral of problems that we all had to fix later, which made us so much, slower. That the same team with a solid knowledge about who are the users, what voices do we have across the globe, because it was a global solution that we were trying to build. Why are the users asking for it? What do they really need behind that? And how does this knowledge now come together with technical feasibility and business requirements? And therefore build the solution from there. That really was that key of, we had 3 months of that team trying to build something that just didn't work, and maybe even more time spent on trying to fix the issues, to them just dashing out a wonderful solution for 3 weeks and all the users across the board saying, yes, awesome, I can use it.
Yeah. And the way that you achieved that, if I understood correctly, was creating that shared understanding by using, for example, the service blueprint to
Yes,
highlight what do we know, what do we not know, and what do we really need to know, but
absolutely.
also what do we think we know, but maybe we don't,
Yes,
and using that as a starting point.
that was a starting point, and wonderful that you're bringing it back to it because it wasn't the only thing. Especially when working with so many teams, so many minds, everyone busy, a document that lies somewhere is just going to die. So, how do you help those teams not only understanding the document, working with it, but also then really understanding the knowledge and moving that forward? So, what I introduced as well is a quick workshop framework where the teams, especially the key stakeholders of that team, would come together, understand the user perspective, understand the technical feasibility, the business requirements, contextual knowledge for the piece of work ahead. So never too much, not overanalyzed, but essentials needed. So the team could be picked up by, hey, this is the context that we need to know. This is what we know. This is what we need to know in addition in order to do great work.
Mm-hmm.
And by just creating that foundation, that really helped the team run and move forward. And of course, using the example of the service blueprint outcome as a way of visualizing it. But that was also one of the key aspects of take the team through, take the key people through, discuss it together, and make shared decisions of what you need to understand and what does valuable and successful look like.
Can you tell me the story from your perspective?
Yes.
Because I think that will really highlight it and bring it to life even more. So we have kind of the abstract, this is how it works for the team, which is nice. But actually, I would be really interested to hear, like, what was your role? How was that journey
Yeah.
for you? How did you enable that? And really bring that to life with your personal experience, and then how
Yes.
that enabled the team to get to the things that you just mentioned.
Yeah. So for our example, we started to break down our great product into small chunks. And one of the chunks was one that I was starting to support. And I had the wonderful situation of the delivery team still being stuck in a fix somewhere else, which allowed me some time and freedom to start of user research, which is always a great idea to have user research upfront to gather insights. And by me starting to fetch out the service blueprint for that piece of work, starting to integrate our SME, so subject matter experts, and really picking up their knowledge and validating their input as well towards that topic, really reflecting, okay, what is this all about? What are the essentials that we still need? What can we cut? And where do we have those burning questions that, if it's a yes or no, will really change our direction?
Yeah.
And by not only starting that work, but with small time requests for key team members, um, going through that journey and asking them for their input so they can start to get prepared and think around the things that we need from their perspective. For
Mhm.
example, technological requirements or data resources. What do we have? What we need to have to build in order to make this happen? What is the key aspect? But also understanding that from a designer perspective or a researcher perspective, we try to understand something that they also need to understand, and that we all try to do the same thing, and we can use each other's skill sets to elevate each other. That really fostered the sense of like, oh, okay, we have a core team and we need to work together in order to make this thing a very valuable but also a speedy one. Um, yes.
And core team, what does that mean? So that was
Yeah.
a smaller group of two, three, four, five, I don't know how many people. And was it only designers? Did that include
Mm-hmm.
other capabilities in there?
Yes, so it was me representing the user experience and researcher role, service design as well. We had a product owner who also played the role of a subject matter expert. We had another subject matter expert that came in with the knowledge of the tool that had to be replaced. And we had a business analyst spending, a couple of hours jumping in, starting to support the setup for the team and the product flow. And of course, a knowledge and value definitions. And we had our tech lead coming in sporadically, I think 2 hours max. We also had a data expert supporting and reflecting their knowledge of the data backend, informing us how the situation was. So all in all, I think we spent about 8 hours in 2 weeks with the key people, and maybe the subject matter expert I looped in maybe a couple of hours more. But the rest really was, fleshing it out, doing research, trying to understand from the standing systems, what do we have, what do we not have, how can I prepare through visual support, which directions we might want to go into, which decisions we might need to do, and what effects would they have if it would go into one or the other direction, so we can make very quick decisions.
Nice. So all the workshops on aligning the understanding would take place in that core team. How did the extended team get involved so that understanding is shared and also provided that an understanding of the value that other developers in the team create?
Yes, absolutely. So what I used was the Lean Inception by Paolo Caroli, and reduced it even more, and I called it a mini kickoff. And we spent, in this particular example, we spent 2 days with the team, introducing the whole core team, which means everyone that I named, including the developers on the team. I think we had 5. And with all of them, helping them understand what is the context of what we need to know, what do we not need to know, where are we currently with our knowledge, what are our key questions, and then together run through some very effective exercises to make decisions together on where do we want to start, what do we prioritize, what needs to go in which order, and which dependencies do we have across the different teams. And after that, we started to run.
Cool. Now, if I hear 2 days, the full team, including developers, sitting in a room and not writing code, I can imagine some business stakeholders might have a heart attack at that thought. Does one really need to spend that time? How did you manage that panic situation that maybe some of your stakeholders might have felt when hearing that?
Yeah. So for one contextual situation, I had the benefit of including my PO very early in my findings and helping him understand the importance of knowledge and decision making up early, so we know which direction we wanted to go. And on the other side, him really being pro team and getting together, collaborating. But I understand that's not always the case, and I, worked in those contexts as well. It is always a decision of someone being, let's say, missing an English word here, brave enough to be brave enough to say, I invest now in order to have speed later. And by having someone who was brave enough in our situation, they really showed as well by the speed of the team through those 3-4 weeks in the contextual situation, that they were like, oh, what did you do? How did you do this? Because we're not stuck anymore. We don't have all those meetings anymore, trying to discuss and find out things that then turned out that we needed to fix something somewhere else. How did this work? And key people then being part of the session saying like, oh yeah, we want to do this again. Johanna, can we do this again? Mm-hmm. So it really not just, again, this aspect of you have to experience it to really understand and hop in and drive. And really, be speedy by not being slow.
That sounds cool. I wonder what that means in practice. Be speedy by not being slow.
So what I talk about here is much of the work of sorry, there was a reconnection quickly, but I think I'm back. So what I mean by being speedy by not being slow is something that comes from a design perspective as well. Most of the challenges that we have as designers is that some of the value that we bring in through early work, early validation, is that we don't run into errors. We are not as slow as we might have been, and we are enabling the team to understand something, but then they don't spend time trying to understand later. How do you measure not going wrong because of something that you've done right in the beginning? And that lack of measurement is sometimes, the hardest way of proving success. But in this project case study, it really showed a wonderful comparison of the same team just speeding across the whole thing, but just having that investment early on, and people learning about it, witnessing it, experiencing it, and saying, oh yeah, of course, it makes sense. And then being sure that it moves on. Of course, there are some variants of requirements. You need to have the people in the sessions that can help all the team understand the contextual information. You need to have a good research upfront, an effective research upfront to gather just enough contextual knowledge so you're not, again, stuck by trying to find out something later. And this mindset of, okay, this is what it's on about, let's move, let's go ahead and let's make quick decisions and test it early. Because otherwise you're again kind of stuck, and that's also maybe where that scarism comes from of, ooh, I just don't want to have another consultancy coming in doing workshop after workshop and nothing else happens after. You need to do that bridge and the active move into delivery and really continuously driving on the sense of, what do we test now? How do we validate this now? Do we have enough contextual knowledge to really execute this now?
So by having everyone in the room, having that conversation up front and having that common starting place, we identify, we don't have to have all those conversations later where if we know all the visualizations that go around the internet around the number of people in the team and the communication lines, that increases, where we then end up stuck because everyone has to talk to everyone later on, trying to clarify. But we're bringing it into one conversation, one context at the start, have that common understanding where we can then move forward into the same direction. And by that, we are able to create value faster and don't end up in a place where we're stuck because we have so many unsolved problems, not problems, but we have so many unsolved questions that we didn't get the chance to ask earlier, but now they're holding us back from moving forward.
Exactly. Or in the most scary part, unearth something that devalidates everything we've done before, or has a very complex fix that we suddenly need to do, in a very foundational layer of our software or product strategy.
Yeah. And what I understood is that that had actually happened. That was your
Absolutely.
comparison benchmark of the 3 months to create something that no one wanted. That's not just a nice storyline that we picked out of there. That's something that had actually happened. That was the
Yes.
context when you came in.
Yeah.
The team had kind of got themselves into that end and realized, yeah, we had a lot of assumptions, and one of them was, on multiple ones, just showed that this doesn't actually solve the problem, and we have to start again.
Absolutely. And it was made by very clever people and a wonderful team. By the way, wonderful to collaborate with. That through the stress and pressure just got driven into that situation of, oh, it will be just fine. Just show that we moved on and that we created something visually new.
Yeah.
And that is that very, fragile and dangerous situation of just moving ahead without proof.
Yeah. So the team, it reminds me of a saying, go slow to go fast. And in a way, that's what your approach is
Mhm.
you go slow in the beginning, you bring everyone along, and by doing that, you're able to go much faster.
Absolutely. Yes.
Wonderful. So what did that mean in terms of your role as a designer? If everyone has that understanding now, what does that mean for the value that you bring to the team?
Mhm. So in that context again of that project, it meant that um, research and service design work was much more acknowledged, and we were able to get a seat at the table around the strategy team, which in hindsight again enabled the whole program to make decisions early, including validation and including user reflection, in order to drive the product in a very new direction.
Yeah.
It also allowed me to open up the research stream. So, as I mentioned before, we had one user, one very opinionated and biased user that was very happy to tell the team exactly what they needed to do, also on a visual level. That was very frustrated because, in the end, he didn't also get from the team that the team promised to do. And we were able to get away from this very challenging situation of building a multi-million product for one person's opinion to open up the board to users across the globe.
Mm-hmm.
We had 5 active regions with 3 to 4 users each, which we could regularly get input from and also test our solutions on their usability and understanding without us explaining anything. And that really was a game changer as well, not only on, yay, as a designer, I can do my work, or yay, as a team, we can do upfront work to validate our things early, but I also was able to give my team the tools of how to do good research, how to involve the users in a healthy way, because you never just build something on a user saying that they want it. You always have to reflect on what is the golden center between the user experience or the needs, the technical feasibility, and the product requirements, and how to get into a healthy balance with that connection to the users, how to involve them well, how to keep them engaged, in loop, wanting it, trying to use it, and you being ensured that what you actually do is bringing real value. And I think that really changed the mindset of the team as well, and was later also reflected by upper management on, hey, this is the team that actually works user-centric. because the user were knocking on the upper management door. Hey, I know we shouldn't talk, but can I be part of this project? I really want to use this tool. I mean, I sorry, I need to share this. I really celebrate this moment. But everybody else also understanding that value and really saying like, oh yeah, there's something there, and people really want to go for it, and that really gonna solve not only the user's problem, but the company's problem, um, by replacing this monolithic tool into something that is simple and quick and effective and actually helps people do their work much faster, by the way.
Yeah, and it's maybe worth saying that the tool was for internal users. Hence, those
Yes.
users knocked on the door of senior
Yes.
leaders to say,
Yeah.
"Let me use this too, please."
Absolutely. Yes.
Wonderful. So, what I hear apart from the success story is that your role as a UX researcher also changed in some way from the gatekeeper of research and the person who does the research to enabling the team to maybe go and find their own information and do research and be part of those sessions.
Absolutely. Again, that speeds up your team. Not only by, getting more designers on the team, you can have it speedy. Of course, it is recommendable to have someone with research skills to do very complex research or user testing. But if you don't have those people, you can also upskill the ones that you have to a level that is acceptable and doesn't falsify your results.
Mm-hmm.
So by going in and not only opening up the research sessions for people to listen in, but also, and this was key, to reflect on the session after it with the whole team that was present, saying, okay, what have we learned? What did we hear? What did we see? But what did that mean in the background? And what does it mean for our team specifically? That was absolute key, because those steps haven't really been done before, by saying, okay, that is a piece of work that we need to invest now, and say, okay, we heard that the user wants to have elements moved on a page, for example. We saw that the user was trying to scroll and trying to move things around. But what it really means and what is the baseline behind it is that the user needs more space for the actual working area on the screen. So how may we change this in combination with the requirements of the other teams and our design style guide and accessibility guidance that we have in place.
Yeah.
And that really moved us from, oh, the user said we need to move it up here, we just move it up here, to, how can we make a system just that allows the user to really have more space within their working environment, and do that across the whole tool, because if it's true on this page, it will be true on others as well. And that really, changed our speed across the whole program, across multiple projects, because people were then able to use those design stencils and apply them on their pages. And therefore, we reduced costs dramatically.
Yeah. And again, you created that joint understanding by involving the whole team. So I heard kind of three tools now to get to that understanding: service blueprint, joint kickoff, joint UX research sessions for all different types of roles who are on the team to join and participate and build that common understanding.
Yes.
Very
And
cool.
I completely understand that for some people, especially this listing is like, oh my God, that's so much time. And we had the same situation in our team over and over again, with multiple people in multiple layers, and people being afraid of the effects that it might have. However, it was really this experiencing of the change because of it, and helping people understand what we're doing, and giving them options of, hey, we can do it a different way, we can do it quicker, we can try it in another way, and do async knowledge exchange, etc., and people being able to compare that with the success or delay of the teams and saying, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Let's keep going.
Yeah. I mean, that's also the kind of provocative question I had on my mind was, are you really saying that developers now have to learn UX research now as well? Shouldn't they just be programming?
um, yes and no. So ideally, if someone is very skilled in one direction and is hired for a specific task, they should ideally work on that and use their power and their tools to do that. And there speaks nothing against people who want to be more generalistic and go over roles, etc. I actually really invite that. And it is also a question of what makes sense for your team. What capacities do you have? And I see more and more that people are actually asking of developers to do user research, of business analysts to have the user, perspective in mind already, of SMEs to replace the role of a user and just quickly tell the team what the user is on about. And I understand that people are trying to be faster. And I would say it doesn't matter who does it, as long as you have someone there who has the skills to do it, enough skills to do it, and has the capacity to do so. Because over a long run, you're burning out your people by just having all those stretch roles and all those requirements of just doing it all and be, a unicorn within the software environment, and just being able to manage it all. But over a certain time, at a certain point, it just becomes too complex. And that's why we have different roles and different people being specifically there for a part of the software development and the support of the team. So if you see that people are struggling to do it, if you notice that teams are just reacting to things very quickly or making very, dangerous decisions based on no research or no foundation, or do research by just asking an opinion and doing what the opinion says, then you might want to request someone coming in with more skills, with more background, and helping you build that change. And also, helping your team being a bit more skilled about it so they can also, even if they're not in the role, understand what good looks like.
Yeah, I think that's also something that you've mentioned before, is that it's about, do we have the right do we have the right skills? Do we have the right capabilities on the team? Not what are the different roles, but that can be or should be fluent sometimes to just make the team more effective, but making sure you've got the right skills and that's balanced with the workload that exists in the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been in so many different projects and so many different phases and setups. It can all be fluent and it all can work, as long as you have someone who is able to set it up as a team and notice what is required, in which phase do we have that, and also the team being able to reflect after a while and say, oh, do we still need someone who is very specialized, or do we maybe need someone additionally who just picks up a task because it becomes too much for the people, or are there just too many question marks and you need someone that just brings in a couple of answers. Be flexible, I would recommend.
Yeah. Your record. So, ich wollte das jetzt nicht machen, währenddessen du sprichst, weil dann kann ich es nicht rausschneiden. Oh ja, warte mal.
Ja.
Oh, look, ich hoffe, ich habe jetzt keine rote Lippe.
Also durch den Screencast sieht man nicht.
So we did speak about speed a lot. I mean, that's what the whole conversation in some way is about. I'm really curious, what are some common misconceptions that you've encountered around speed and how to achieve that?
Yes. the main misconception around speed is that you just do the same thing but faster. It doesn't work. Mostly it doesn't work. Um, being quicker, being faster will give something else if you don't change something about the way that you're trying to achieve it. And things like more pressure, stronger deadlines, having more project management in, more, organization or, direction or like a fixed workflow or something like that may not work and may not actually mean speed in the end. Especially if your team is like this one here or the multiple teams where you had partially very low knowledge about why you're actually working on something, what are you trying to achieve, and how does my work depend on other people's work. You are faster if you are reducing workload in the long run, or slowliness in the long run. So I would say, yeah, biggest misconception about speed is that it's the same thing. You need to change something in order to be faster or speedier. And it mainly starts with understanding what would that be and what do people need to know in order to make that happen. And I want to emphasize on knowing enough, because knowing everything will slow you down. Analysis paralysis was one of our keywords in the project. And running down rabbit holes was a very, famous reference. But yeah, it's about knowing enough and being enabled. That's the level that you should aim at.
Yeah. And what stops organizations from integrating design more strategically in engagements and projects?
Across the design community and different product communities, this is a very hot topic. Especially now, I see that popping up on LinkedIn as well, multiple times. Designers asking themselves, "Hey, why do people not understand the value that I can bring?" I was asking myself the same thing over years and trying out multiple different ways. My conclusion, based on my experience at the moment and also reflecting this project, I would say they haven't experienced it. They haven't gotten to a knowledge where they can judge which skill sets can really support them, and that this design skill set is actually something that can elevate them, not only them as a product, not only them as a business, but also them as team, and make everyone start as you have that bubble up effect of creating success.
Yeah. So the solution to that is get people to experience design or how design works, working shoulder and shoulder, bring them into the process, into the way of working, to seeing the value.
Yeah, or allow a designer a seat on your strategy table for a while,
Yeah.
and be open, listen to them, or be curious. There are so many podcasts out there that might just require half an hour of your time, an hour of your time, or read a book like Don't Make Me Think, just to kind of get a nudge of like, what do people mean, and ask yourself, how can you add validation early into what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't want to know early on if they will be successful or not? And a designer skill is, it's so matching for enabling that to any setup.
Yeah. So we talked about transforming a product team into a high performing team. And I wonder, how do you really measure that? How do you know that your team is now high performing or higher performing than before? How can you
Yes.
evaluate that?
Love that question. It's also a very challenging one because, as I said before, sometimes it's impossible to measure a team's impact of not running into errors, not doing a misbuild, and mostly nobody's measuring that really because it's sort of expected. Of course, it's a wonderful thing to start measuring if you notice something going wrong, changing something, and then comparing it to something being better. That always helps. But also use the validation and the feedback that you get about the thing that you've built. So measuring impact by the number of people who are trying to be part of your tool, or the time someone spends on a task before and after using what you've built and what solution you're offering is one way. Your reputation across the board. In our case, we were named as a team that is truly user-centric and provides real value to the users, and that being propagated. I think that's a wonderful measure of success. Or thinking around how might you want to measure anything, or what could you potentially measure with your business leads, with your POs, and saying, hey, what's important for you? What is the status quo right now? What may we want to measure? How can we measure it? How can I help you measure this? And there are so many different ways that you can do that. And I think we need to do it more often. And also, reflect on, hey, what is a good measure and what does good look like? And does good also look like not looking bad? Because many products, many services, many team setups, many cultural aspects can also look bad. And there are aspects that we can do to change that and also measure that change.
Yeah, the looking bad is interesting. And I think the one unexpected aspect that you mentioned around how do we know the team is high performing is actually measuring that by the success of the product.
Mm.
Because I have definitely come across that perception of a high performing team that ships stuff quickly. When
Mm-hmm.
no one stops to think and it's like, yeah, we shipped stuff quickly, but
Mm-hmm.
people aren't using it. Or our app store ratings are bad.
Yeah,
That means we don't have a high performing team because we have a team that
absolutely.
just ships stuff. What we need is a high performing team that creates value. And if that's not
Yes.
happening, our team is not high performing.
Yeah, I love that reflection because there's so many arguments for high performing being fast, high performing just running without issues. I agree. Like, what's the point of dashing it out quickly if no one wants it? Of course, there are different levels, right? Dashing out an MVP quickly in order to then test it, that's absolutely valid, right? And you're high performing in that goal in order to then validate, does it work, right? And that's sometimes also the case with very complex data projects like ours. We had to come to a certain level in order to truly validate some functionalities, right? However, if it's just high performing to dash out a tool that then is on an Apple store and no one wants it, or your support line is super hot because everyone's trying to make this happen and is super frustrated, or like a tool that we were actually replacing in our example, users just saying, I don't want to use it, you just make me use it, but I don't want to.
And that's, I think, a
Yeah.
really interesting topic that I keep hearing in the course of my career, but even more now with the the fear of missing out around the topic of AI. Many tools are now being built, and I've heard many conversations around, hey, we haven't a challenge around adoption. People are refusing to use the
Mhm.
tool. What's
Mhm.
wrong with them? That's a narrative that I
Mm.
sometimes hear. And what I really love about your example is that this is software for internal employees, and a strategy that has been uh, uh, involved, employed in many organizations, is to build it and then do training and roll it out and force people to use it. It's
Absolutely.
sometimes called that. And we also know that that doesn't work. You've seen it in your situation where people don't use it. And you managed to turn it around from a situation of a tool that just really no one cared about to knocking on the door of the CEO. And I think that's really fascinating because adoption is all around answering a need and solving it in a meaningful way for users, whether they're employees or external
Mhm.
users. And I think
Absolutely.
being able to do that for internal users and keep making that top of mind and not going down the route around, we are now telling you to use that,
Yeah.
it's very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't agree more. And also that experience of hearing that over and over again, and also that pattern that comes out of there, where people who know that whatever is on the app store has to be working, has to be useful, has to be tested before, in order for them to even download it. But when it comes to their tool for the internal employees and their colleagues, they're afraid of asking them what they need and what they want, and just trying to dash it out and build it.
Mm.
Um,
Why are people
and
afraid?
that's a really good question. However, I have an I have a theory that it has to do much more with internal politics than
Mm.
people might agree on or would be happy to share out loud. We also had that situation in our project, and it also was one of the big challenges that we had, that we had main key stakeholders and upper management being afraid of us talking to the users because we might tell them something that they shouldn't know, or we might um, they might request something from us that we wouldn't be able to deliver, and they might have an influx of complaints coming in, or they might look bad in front of their superiors building something wrong, or be having a reputation through mouth to mouth, that they weren't doing the right thing, or that people would be frustrated about it. If done right, you actually can work towards a reputation of being the one finally solving their problems. And again, that is something that has to be experienced in order to be truly supported, and takes that fear away in a stronger way to push that boundary and say, oh, but I don't care if you have something negative to say. We're taking it in. It's wonderful, valuable feedback. Thank you for telling me, and here's something that you can use already. And this sort of change from, oh, I don't want to share what I work on, I want to show you the shiny finished thing and you go and work with it, to, hey, I need to tell you that I don't know everything. I need some input from your side in order to build something truly valuable. It might not be there tomorrow. You might have to wait and sit that out. But thank you for your time and input. And
Yeah.
that mindset is just very different, especially from an employee to employee relationship.
So that's how you navigated it with the internal users.
Mm.
How did you help your stakeholders to
Mm.
overcome that fear?
I must say, I think for one key stakeholder, I didn't quite manage. He was a bit far removed to be, actively in the sessions, etc. But he started to learn and trust the voices from, his coworkers. that were very much closer to us. But for those who were moving from a big question mark in their face to actually actively supporting us, were those that I picked up early and asked first, hey, I know you're very knowledgeable around your team, or around the sense of the user. Can you give me first input? And here's my bunch of questions. Which ones of these do you also have? And then helping them to understand that having a question or not knowing something is something worth celebrating. And then, step by step, changing the mindset of being afraid of being wrong to actually saying, oh, cool, we found this question early, so we can validate it early and therefore not run into the challenge of doing something wrong. And having the reputation of building something wrong and spending millions on building something wrong. And that really made that switch of saying, okay, cool. I can be proud of what I've done, especially after the user said, oh, cool, I can just use it without you explaining it to me, because it really solves what I was talking to you about. Of course, that takes time and effort and, continuously hand-holding of all the people that are involved. But once you're at that point, and I'm really saying, oh yeah, that notion of me saying, I don't know something, elevated us to this level now. And, I was so fortunate that they were allowing themselves to trust me and being part of that journey, allowing me to take them along. That's also not a given necessarily, and it's very different from person to person. I want to acknowledge that it's very hard work. But once you're there and once you're able to use your empathy skills to understand where someone else is coming from and what challenges they might have around this, and not just hear, oh, they blocked me from talking to users, but understand, oh, they're afraid of looking bad or not knowing in front of their colleagues. How do you mitigate that? How do you help that? I think that really is a game changer.
And that's again, in a way, applying design skills is to understanding our users, who aren't always just the users of the tools that we create, but they might be our stakeholders. And if they are resisting something, what is it that's causing that? Using empathy, but also using curiosity and research skills to dive a little bit deeper and to understand what those things are that holds them back.
Absolutely, yes. And not just in a consultancy position that I was in. In any company, I wouldn't do it differently. My team members, and I'm including clients as well, internals into that, and anyone beyond, everyone that I work with is a user to me in one way or another, of my services, of my collaboration, of the skill sets that I can apply. And by using that skills of saying like, oh, what do I need to know? How can I ask open questions in order to find out the why? It doesn't only elevate the whole team, it elevates you as a designer of, applying your skills in a good way.
Mm. It sounds like you have it all figured out, which I really love. So I have a question. I have a hard question for you. Actually, what were those things that went wrong? What were things that were unexpectedly hard? What were your lowlights where you were like, oh my God, what am I doing?
Oh, yes, many, and daily aspects. I think one of the main things were I underestimated how hard it is for people to really trust in what you say and allow you to show what you mean. So giving you that space in order to just show it, especially in, you know, a high pressure environment. You spending that time. It was really hard throughout the whole process for some key people to say, oh yeah, but it is actually good that you spend that time on that. And I had a lot of battles around justifying what I do, how much I do, or requesting for more support in order to validate the workload, um, or even that I had to explain to someone in detail what I do on a daily basis. That was really tough.
Mm.
Again, it came from a space of uncertainty, and I understood that um, it must be really hard from an outside perspective, or from a perspective of, let's say, you know, someone who is um, there to ensure delivery, that you suddenly have someone who just goes and talks to people and comes back with something that isn't much different to a picture that someone else might have said, or how to quantify time spent on aligning the team. And, you know, again, talking to a couple of people, it's not as quantifiable as having coded a story of 3 points within a certain amount of time. And it was tearing at me because it was a constant fight.
Mm.
And it really required some community support, some, you know, internal support, some ally conversations of keep going at it. I am really proud of, that I managed to do that in the end, and then I was able to set that foundation. But I don't want to present it as this holy garden. It really had some. Um, it had costs,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So it was hard to gain the trust, and maybe invite people into your process. I heard that. And the way you navigated that was to keep going. Beyond keeping going, how did you gain that trust? How did
Mm.
you, and I appreciate we won't always successfully do this with everyone, but how did you get build that trust to allow and bring people into your design process?
Mm. I think um, I think one big barrier was people trying to understand what I meant when they couldn't see something,
Mm.
or when it was just talking about something without a trace of thought, in a sense of, you know, a service blueprint saying, oh, but here's what I mean, or actually supporting material, having supporting material, what effects it would have on the design,
Mm.
by what I was talking about around back end issues.
Yeah.
Um, One aspect also was that it wasn't just me saying something, but users saying it. Of course, I came in later when I had access to the users. So it was sort of, I didn't ask the users because I didn't know. I sometimes asked the users open questions in order for them to support telling the team, hey, this is what they see as well, or what people really struggle with. Um, but I think one main thing was also that I had to spend the time asking people what they need. So that felt
Mm.
heard.
Interesting.
So it wasn't just, oh, but the designer wants something and oh, nobody understands me. It's about, oh, what goals do I have? What goals do we have as a team? And understanding this, oh, but we want to do it together. And here's someone that wants to help. And someone who, you know, um, asks me if that help is okay to follow up on. So um, it was all about trying to understand the other.
Yeah, I love that. Try to understand the other, and find those common goals, like you said, and show that actually we try to we try to achieve the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And in everything that we've done, it always came back to um, you're always as strong as a team. You always are as successful as the team's ability to build something together.
Mm.
And once that clicked, that moved a lot of things, that changed a lot of things. And the longer I struggle with someone trying to understand me, the further they were removed from the team's work. And it really showed that again of like, if we're strong as a team and understand each other, speak the same language as a team, we're really able to create success with value through speed. And yeah, I think that was one of those key aspects.
Yeah, you're only as strong as the team. I really love that. What does that mean in practice?
Mm. It means don't go in and say I know it better. And it never means one person is right. It always is a collaboration between different inputs that you require in order to understand what good looks like and what right looks like, uh, given all the contextual things that pull on the product, on a service, on a team, on a culture, on a context.
Yeah.
And that's something that you just have to navigate and understand.
Yeah. So, as part of this whole journey in transforming a team into a high performing team, what are the principles that made you successful?
Listen, um, listen and understand. Make things visible. Make things transparent, and create a sense of ownership for the work that you have to do as a team. So try to understand what enables the whole team and others in order for you to be enabled to do your part and understand what you can do, and what success means for bringing in your skills for that team. So use, again, I'm a experienced designer, I'm a service designer, product lead. Um, the main thing that I always need to try and do is understand what is required of me, what does the team need, and adjust what I do accordingly. And that, I think, is the principle for moving everything forward.
Nice. I love that. Johanna, thank you so much for sharing all the inspiring insights. I have one final question, which is what is something that you have read recently that inspires you, that you believe could be interesting to our listeners? It could also be a podcast or anything
Mm.
seen, watched, read.
This is a wonderful situation where I feel like I need to say something very clever and I'm not sure. um, I I'm very bad at remembering names or book titles. This is a huge disclaimer. But I never forget situation and how they make me feel and what they make me think of. And my brain also works in a way that it has this wonderful ability to connecting things that never connected before and just looping those together. And I think many things that I draw from are conference talks that
Ooh.
I listen to or watch again. I've been a member of the IXDA for a long time, and I love their level of talks that they brought in, sharing insights, sharing failure. That's also why I do this talk here, and thank you so much for having me. Of opportunity of sharing those sort of situations, because I think that really helps, because you might be in a similar situation saying, oh, it worked there, maybe here as well. because as humans, as all those contextual setups of teams and mindsets and cultures, it's never a match. It never really is something specific. It's always maybe a direction, and the variety of input, I think that is the beauty that really supports, and also understanding something from a different perspective that you look at on daily but you never thought about it. I think the podcast 99 pi brings it out quite nicely, and one of the episodes was about street signs. I never thought about street signs. I mean, they're there and they give you direction, but there's such a wonderful story behind it, and what you can learn by just looking at something daily in a different way, and doing that brain muscle training as well, of not just taking something for it, but learning something new about it, although it's just so normal. And I think one key book that really helped me in this project was Culture Map. Again, I forgot the lady's name, and I think I just borrowed it out. It's not in my library right now. But Cultural Map talks about how different cultures communicate, and how they might understand something from a perspective like, in Germany, we really value direct feedback and being very frank and clear about what you mean, whereas it is very challenging to receive direct feedback, as, for example, in Britain. And it feels very rude that someone was so direct and negative to someone. Whereas it feels very rude in Germany if you said everything's fine, but it isn't in the end. And learning about those nuances, about how something is maybe perceived versus communicated, I find it very fascinating. It really supported navigating these different cultures in this project as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Johanna, for sharing the different sources of inspiration. And where can people find you if they'd love to reach out to you and chat a little bit more?
LinkedIn is the main source for sure. I will definitely also post this talk on there. You can Google it through there. And anytime, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to talk about those challenges, learn about yours specifically, and also help people understand how someone with a design skill or mindset might be able to support. I think there's a lot of value in that. And yeah, personally love to solve complex problems.
Yes, I totally empathize with that. Complex problems are things that get me excited. Johanna, thank you so much for sharing your experience. It's been very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And now a question to our listeners. Question to you. How are you able to help your product teams to deliver value faster? How do you do that when the delivery pressure is on and it feels like we just need to race forward and that we don't have time to invest into pausing and thinking things through? How do you create that space anyway? And by doing that, enable teams to move faster. I would really, really love to hear your stories. What were your successes and your setbacks? Please reach out to me directly or share your experience in the comments. Finally, if you enjoyed this episode as much as I did and took a lot of value from what Johanna shared, please share this with your network and like and subscribe the podcast in your favorite streaming platform. And by doing that, you help others to discover the valuable insights that Johanna shared today. Thank you, and see you next time.